Now, with the cost of living biting hard, experts say that there is a strong chance more will need help from social workers this winter. But recent findings suggest that 58% of people believe social workers have a bad reputation and say that they wouldn't deal with one if their family needed help or support. Well, we spoke to Lisa, who is Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Frontline, to discuss what needs to be done to help the public understand the vital work social workers do and remove any stigma around receiving the help.
Frontline has conducted a study which has looked at what the perceptions are of social work, I think over 2,000 18 to 30-year-olds were surveyed as part of the study, and what we found was that 45% of people said that their view of social work came primarily from media, so whether that was from broadcast or paper media or social media. 58% of the people surveyed said that they had a negative view of social workers, so that social workers in their mind had quite a bad reputation. And 31% said that they wouldn't go to a social worker if they were in need of support in any way. I suppose in terms of one of the things that I would say is that there is often quite a negative view of social work. So often connected with some of the kind of more serious case reviews or the really tragic stories that we've heard in the media, which have a very kind of emotive response and subject the profession understandably to a lot of scrutiny. I think that what we don't hear, and as my colleague said, is some of the counter-narratives, some of the times when we are really welcomed into families' homes, when families are at a point of crisis and really welcome the intervention and the support that we can offer and provide. That is probably a less well advertised and shared narrative of social work. I think in terms of the impact that it has in terms of social workers, I think the main challenge is that, as I alluded to, the negative stories that we hear have an afterlife. So it means that there is perhaps a mistrust of social workers when they start to work with children and families. And there is maybe a lack of people seeing social work as a profession that they want to come into and join and be part of. And I think that it's kind of a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy insofar as if people are not willing to join the profession, there are less social workers available to do the really powerful and meaningful work that we need them to do. I think it goes back to that idea of the single story, really. And the single story that we hear about social work is the worst case scenario, the worst possible outcome. And I think that the reality is that, as social workers have said, we're not often publicised for the positive work that we do. So 700,000 children that we currently work to support and their families may not tell the story of their intervention with social work. And it's not that we work with great numbers of people. So when I think about other professions, when I think about kind of health or education, we all have an experience of that. So we have all been through an education system, and if we need health services, we're all able to access that. So we have a counter-narrative that fits alongside some of the more negative stories that we might hear about those professions. We don't have the same in social work. So we don't have the kind of everybody having an experience of having a social worker. And if a family has had an experience, a really positive one, they're probably less likely to talk about that openly because of the stigma around having social work involvement. So it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, a bit of a negative narrative that continues, where the only story we hear, the only one that's promoted is kind of the worst case outcome. Going forwards to try and kind of provide a different story or narrative around social work is kind of what we're here doing today, promoting social work as a profession that is not only, I think, an amazing profession to be part of, one that is rewarding, one that is definitely challenging at times, emotionally, psychologically, but also one that has times of huge success where we see positive outcomes for children, for families, and for those workers that they worked as, and for workers as well. So I think providing some of those different stories is a really important step forward in doing that. And if I could just add, Maddie, I think for me, one of the reasons why this is so important now is because we have 1 in 4 children currently living in poverty, and the cost of living crisis means that is going to possibly get worse for families, and they need to know that social workers are there, that they need to be able to trust social workers to join, support them, to empower them, to walk alongside them through that crisis and come out at the other end. And I think the dangerous myths and stereotypes that there are around social workers mean that that might not happen, and then we do end up with that crisis situation, which none of us want for the children and families we work to support.
There you go, Lisa there. We are taking another quick break, but coming up, a play with a timely point to be made. A retelling of Lysistrata shows the lengths a medical student is willing to go in protest of NHS funding cuts. Stay with us.
Seb and Sandra decided to get creative for their new home cinema upgrade. Thankfully, they didn't compromise on their broadband, because they know that BT gives them a speed guarantee, super straight.